King's guard carries sword, and Frank the soldier salute him. Birds could be heard in the distance, but inside the palace area, everything followed strict order and discipline. Guards were already in position, standing straight and alert, wearing their uniforms with pride. This place was not just stone walls and open paths. It was a symbol of tradition, duty, and respect that had been protected for generations. Among the guards stood the king's guard, a man chosen not only for his strength, but also for his calm nature and deep sense of responsibility. He carried his sword carefully, not as a sign of power, but as a sign of trust placed upon him. The sword was clean and well kept, just like his uniform. His posture was perfect, and his eyes remained focused ahead. He understood that even the smallest mistake could bring shame to the position he held. For him, standing guard was not a routine task. It was an honor he never took lightly. As the sun slowly rose higher, soldiers from different units began their daily movements. Some were heading toward training areas, while others were assigned to patrol duties. Each step they took followed rules taught during long months of training. Among them was Frank, a soldier known for his discipline and simple nature. He was not loud, nor did he seek attention. He believed that true respect was earned through actions, not words. Frank adjusted his uniform carefully before starting his route. He always made sure everything was in place, from his boots to his cap. For him, wearing the uniform meant carrying the values of honesty and duty. He had learned this from his early days in training, where mistakes were corrected firmly but fairly. Those lessons stayed with him, shaping how he walked, spoke, and behaved. As Frank moved forward, his thoughts briefly went back to his journey. He remembered the first day he entered the training camp. He had felt nervous but determined. Life before joining the service had been simple and full of struggles. He came from a modest background where hard work was a daily habit. Joining the army was not easy, but he never gave up. Each challenge made him stronger and more patient. The path Frank walked that morning passed close to the royal area, where the king's guard stood. This path was special, and soldiers were expected to maintain the highest level of discipline there. Frank knew the importance of this place. Every step he took became slower and more careful. His face showed focus and respect, as if he was reminding himself that this was not an ordinary moment. The king's guard noticed Frank approaching from the corner of his eye. Even though he did not turn his head, he was aware of every movement around him. Years of service had trained him to observe without reacting. He recognized Frank as one of the soldiers who always followed rules without complaint. That recognition did not bring pride, but a sense of shared understanding. Frank stopped walking when he reached the proper distance. His back straightened naturally, and his movements became precise. There was no hesitation in him. He raised his hand in a clean and respectful salute, just as he had been taught. This salute was not rushed or careless. It carried meaning. It showed respect for the uniform, the duty, and the responsibility the king's guard carried. Time seemed to slow down for a brief moment. The area remained quiet, yet the moment felt powerful. Other soldiers nearby continued their duties, unaware of the importance of what was happening. For Frank, this salute was not about being seen or praised. It was about honoring service and tradition. The king's guard remained still, holding his sword firmly. His expression stayed calm, but inside, he felt a quiet acknowledgement. He understood that such gestures kept the spirit of discipline alive. The sword he carried felt heavier in that moment, reminding him of the responsibility placed upon his shoulders. It was not the weight of metal, but the weight of trust. Frank held his salute for the required time, then lowered his hand smoothly. His face showed no emotion, yet his heart felt steady and proud. He knew he had done what was right. Without waiting for approval, he prepared to continue his path. That was how discipline worked. It was silent and strong. As Frank took his next step, he felt a sense of clarity. Moments like these reminded him why he chose this life. The early mornings, the long hours, and the strict rules all had meaning. They built character and unity among those who served. He walked forward with confidence, knowing that respect was something that lived in actions, not words. Behind him, the king's guard remained at his post, unchanged in position but aware of the moment that had passed. Such exchanges were brief, yet they held great value. They reminded him that duty was shared among all ranks. Whether one stood guard with a sword or marched along a path, the purpose remained the same. The morning continued as usual. Orders were followed, duties were carried out, and the palace grounds stayed secure. But for Frank and the king's guard, the moment left a quiet mark. It showed that respect did not need an audience. It only needed sincerity. As the sun climbed higher, Frank disappeared down the path, blending back into his daily routine. Yet inside him, the morning felt different. He carried the calm pride of a soldier who understood his place and honored it fully. The day had just begun, but it had already delivered a lesson that would stay with him for a long time. This was not a story of grand events or loud actions. It was the story of a simple moment that carried deep meaning. A morning of duty, a guard with a sword, and a soldier's salute came together to show what true service looked like. Frank's life as a soldier did not begin with pride or comfort. It began long before he wore a uniform, in a small and quiet place where life was simple but not easy. He grew up watching people work hard every day just to move forward. From a young age, he learned that nothing valuable comes without effort. These early lessons slowly shaped his thinking and prepared him for a future he did not yet fully understand. As a boy, Frank admired discipline and order. He was drawn to stories of service, loyalty, and responsibility. While others dreamed of quick success, Frank believed in steady progress. He understood that strength was not only physical, but also mental. This belief stayed with him as he grew older. When the time came to choose a path, he chose service, knowing it would demand patience, sacrifice, and honesty. The first days of training were the hardest. The routine was strict, and there was no room for excuses. Every morning began early, and every day tested both body and mind. Frank struggled at first, not because he lacked effort, but because he was learning to push beyond limits he never knew existed. There were moments when his muscles felt weak and his confidence felt low. Still, he never considered giving up. The trainers were firm but fair. They corrected mistakes without anger and praised improvement without exaggeration. Frank respected them because they treated every recruit equally. He quickly learned that respect was earned through consistency, not words. Each correction was a lesson, and each challenge was an opportunity to grow. Slowly, his movements became sharper, and his focus became stronger. Frank also learned the importance of teamwork. Training was not just about individual strength. It was about learning to trust others and to be dependable in return. There were days when one recruit struggled and another stepped in to help. Frank was often that helping hand, not because he wanted recognition, but because he believed unity made everyone stronger. These small acts built bonds that went beyond training. During quiet moments, Frank reflected on his choice. He missed the simplicity of home, but he did not regret leaving it. He understood that service required letting go of comfort. The uniform he wore was not just clothing, it represented commitment. Every time he put it on, he reminded himself why he was there. That reminder kept him focused during difficult days. As months passed, Frank's confidence grew. He learned how to carry himself with calm strength. His posture improved, his discipline sharpened, and his understanding of duty deepened. He no longer followed orders blindly. He understood their purpose. This understanding changed the way he approached every task, no matter how small it seemed. One important lesson Frank learned was self-control. He realized that reacting without thinking could cause harm, while patience often led to better outcomes. This lesson was not easy to master. There were moments when frustration tested him, but each time he chose calm over anger. That choice became a habit, and that habit became part of who he was. Frank's trainers noticed his steady progress. He was not the fastest or the strongest, but he was reliable. When given a task, he completed it with care. When faced with pressure, he remained composed. These qualities made him stand out quietly. He did not seek praise, yet it came naturally through trust. After completing his training, Frank was assigned his duties. The transition from training to active service felt significant. The responsibility was real now. His actions mattered beyond practice. This reality did not scare him. Instead, it grounded him. He understood that every decision reflected not only on himself, but on the values he represented. Daily life as a soldier followed a rhythm. There were routines, inspections, and duties that repeated. To some, this repetition felt dull. To Frank, it felt reassuring. It created stability and focus. He found meaning in doing things correctly, even when no one was watching. That sense of quiet responsibility defined his character. Frank also learned to observe more and speak less. He watched senior soldiers and learned from their behavior. He noticed how they handled pressure and treated others. From them, he learned that leadership was not about authority, but about example. This lesson stayed with him and influenced how he treated those around him. Over time, Frank earned a reputation for discipline and respect. Others trusted him because he remained consistent. He did not change his behavior based on who was watching. This consistency made people comfortable around him. They knew what to expect, and that trust was valuable. Even on difficult days, Frank reminded himself of his purpose. He knew that service was not always easy or rewarding, but he also knew that it was necessary. This belief gave him strength during moments of doubt. He focused on what he could control and accepted what he could not. As Frank continued his journey, he carried these lessons with him. They shaped how he walked, spoke, and acted. They prepared him for moments that would test his values and character. One such moment would come unexpectedly, reminding him that even simple actions could hold great meaning. Frank did not yet know that a quiet morning and a respectful salute would reflect everything he had learned, but his journey had already prepared him for it. Every step he took, every rule he followed, and every choice he made led him closer to becoming the soldier he was meant to be. The moment that followed was quiet, yet it carried a deep sense of meaning. Frank had walked that path many times before, but this time felt different. The air seemed still, and even his footsteps sounded softer against the ground. He did not rush. He moved with calm awareness, fully present in the moment. Every lesson he had learned during his journey came together without him even realizing it. As he approached the royal path, Frank became more mindful of his posture and pace. His shoulders were straight, his head held level, and his eyes focused forward. This was not forced behavior. It came naturally to him now. Discipline had become part of who he was. The surroundings were familiar, yet the importance of the place demanded extra care. Frank respected that without question. Ahead of him stood the king's guard, firm and unmoving, holding his sword with steady hands. The guard's presence was strong, but not intimidating. There was a calm authority in the way he stood, as if he belonged exactly where he was. Frank noticed the clean uniform, the polished details, and the balanced stance. It reflected years of service and responsibility. Frank slowed his steps as he reached the proper distance. His mind was clear. There was no hesitation, no confusion about what to do next. He stopped, placed his feet correctly, and stood tall. His breathing was steady. In that brief pause, he felt the weight of tradition and respect. This was not about rank or recognition. It was about honoring duty. With smooth and controlled movement, Frank raised his hand in salute. His fingers were straight, his arm firm but relaxed. The gesture was clean and confident, showing that he understood its meaning. It was a sign of respect not only for the guard, but for everything the uniform represented. Frank did not look for a reaction. The act itself was enough. For a brief moment, time seemed to slow. The surroundings remained unchanged, yet the connection between the two men felt strong. The king's guard noticed the salute immediately. Without turning his head or changing his expression, he acknowledged the gesture through his posture. It was subtle but meaningful. Such moments did not require words. The sword in the guard's hand caught a small reflection of light. It remained steady, symbolizing responsibility rather than authority. The guard understood the importance of such exchanges. They reminded him why discipline mattered. They showed that respect flowed naturally among those who truly served. Frank held the salute for the proper duration. His arm did not shake, and his expression remained calm. He felt no nervousness, only clarity. Years of training had taught him how to act in moments like these. The salute was not something he performed, it was something he believed in. Nearby, other soldiers continued their routines. Some walked past, others focused on their tasks. None of them paused or stared. To the outside eye, this was an ordinary moment. But for Frank, it felt significant. It reminded him that even small actions could reflect one's values. After the proper moment, Frank lowered his hand smoothly. He did not rush or delay. His movement was controlled and respectful. His eyes remained forward and his posture stayed firm. There was no need to look back or wait. Discipline taught him when to move on. As he took his next step forward, Frank felt a quiet sense of pride. Not the kind that seeks attention, but the kind that settles calmly inside. He knew he had acted correctly. That knowledge brought him peace. He continued walking, his steps steady and confident. Behind him, the king's guard remained at his post. He did not move, yet he carried the awareness of what had just occurred. Moments like these reminded him that service was shared. It connected people across roles and duties. The guard felt a renewed sense of purpose, standing firm with his sword. Frank's thoughts stayed focused as he moved along the path. He did not replay the moment in his mind or seek meaning in it. He simply accepted it as part of his duty. That acceptance showed how far he had come. Earlier in his journey, such moments might have filled him with doubt or pride. Now, they felt natural. The rest of his route awaited him, filled with responsibilities and tasks. Frank approached them with the same calm mindset. He understood that service was not defined by one action, but by consistent behavior over time. Still, that brief exchange stayed quietly within him. As the morning continued, Frank completed his duties with care. He followed instructions, observed his surroundings, and supported others when needed. Nothing about his behavior changed outwardly, yet inside he felt grounded. The moment had reinforced his belief in respect and discipline. The king's guard, too, continued his duty without change. Standing still for long hours required patience and strength. He accepted this without complaint. The sword remained steady in his hand, and his focus never wavered. He understood that his role was not about movement, but about presence. Later, as the sun rose higher, the royal grounds remained orderly and calm. Life moved forward as it always did. Yet within that routine, small moments like this one quietly shaped the spirit of service. They reminded those involved why they chose this path. Frank did not speak of the salute to anyone. There was no need. It was not something to share or explain. It was simply part of his day, carried with quiet respect. He believed that the strongest actions were often the simplest. As the hours passed, Frank remained focused on his duties. The discipline he practiced every day guided him naturally. He did not seek approval or praise. His satisfaction came from knowing he acted with honesty and respect. That moment on the path was not dramatic or loud. It did not change the course of the day, yet it reflected everything Frank stood for. It showed how training, values, and character come together in simple actions. In the end, the salute was more than a gesture. It was a reflection of who Frank had become, a soldier who understood that respect was not shown only in grand moments, but in quiet ones too. And that understanding would continue to guide him through every step of his journey. After the moment passed, life inside the royal grounds returned to its steady rhythm. Frank continued his route, but something within him felt more settled than before. He did not think about the salute again and again, yet its meaning stayed quietly in his heart. It reminded him of the values that guided his actions every day. Respect, discipline, and responsibility were not ideas he carried in his thoughts. They lived in the way he moved and behaved. As Frank walked further, he noticed the familiar sights around him. The clean paths, the tall walls, and the careful order of everything reflected years of discipline. Nothing was out of place. This order did not exist by chance. It was the result of many people doing their duty correctly, day after day. Frank felt proud to be a small part of that system. His next task required him to stand watch for a while. He took his position without delay, adjusting his stance until it felt balanced and strong. Standing still for long periods was not easy, but Frank had learned how to manage it. He focused on his breathing and kept his mind calm. This quiet strength was something he had developed over time. As minutes passed, Frank observed the movements around him. He noticed how other soldiers carried themselves. Some were younger, still learning the rhythm of service. Others were more experienced, moving with confidence and ease. Frank respected them all. He believed that every role mattered, no matter how simple it appeared. The silent exchange earlier with the king's guard had reminded him of that truth. It showed that service connected everyone through shared values. Frank understood that such understanding did not come from words or orders. It grew through experience and respect. While Frank stood at his post, the king's guard remained where he was. His duty required him to stay alert and unmoving. Hours could pass without any change, yet his focus never faded. The sword he held was not a symbol of control, but of trust. It represented the responsibility placed upon him to protect tradition and safety. The guard reflected briefly on the morning. The salute from Frank had been simple, yet it carried sincerity. It reminded him that discipline was alive and strong among the soldiers. Such moments gave meaning to long hours of stillness. They reminded him why his role mattered. As the day continued, the sun climbed higher and the air grew warmer. Frank adjusted his focus to remain comfortable and alert. He had learned that physical comfort was important, but mental strength mattered more. Keeping the mind calm helped the body stay steady. During a short break, Frank spoke briefly with another soldier. Their conversation was simple and respectful. They shared observations about the day and then returned to their duties. There was no need for long discussions. Both understood their responsibilities clearly. Frank often believed that true strength showed itself in quiet moments. Loud actions could attract attention, but steady behavior built trust. He had learned this from watching senior soldiers and experiencing challenges himself. This belief guided how he treated others. As afternoon approached, Frank's duties shifted. He moved to another area, following instructions carefully. Each movement was purposeful. He did not rush or delay. He understood that timing mattered just as much as action. The royal grounds remained peaceful, yet readiness was always present. Soldiers stayed alert, aware that their calm environment depended on their discipline. Frank felt a deep sense of responsibility in this. He knew that his actions, though small, contributed to a larger purpose. The king's guard continued his watch, feeling the weight of time but accepting it with patience. Standing firm required both physical strength and mental focus. He reminded himself that every moment of stillness was a moment of protection. As evening drew closer, the light softened, casting long shadows across the grounds. Frank noticed the change and adjusted his awareness. He remained attentive, understanding that transitions required extra care. This awareness came from experience, not instruction. Frank's thoughts returned briefly to his early days of training. He remembered struggling with patience and focus. Comparing that time to now, he realized how much he had grown. The discipline he once worked hard to learn now came naturally. The day passed without incident, which was a sign of success. Frank completed each task with care, maintaining the standards expected of him. He felt tired but satisfied. This type of tiredness was honest and earned. As his shift neared its end, Frank prepared for the change of duty. He ensured everything was in order before stepping away. He believed that leaving a position properly was just as important as taking it. This belief reflected his respect for those who would follow. The King's Guard, too, prepared for the next phase of duty. He remained focused until relieved. Only then did he allow himself a moment of rest. He reflected on the day, feeling calm and steady. Both men went their separate ways, carrying the quiet lessons of the day with them. Neither spoke of the salute or the shared understanding. It did not need explanation. It lived in their actions. As night slowly approached, the royal grounds remained secure and orderly. Lights began to glow softly, and the pace of movement changed. Frank adjusted smoothly, ready to continue serving whenever needed. The day had been ordinary in appearance, yet meaningful in experience. It showed how discipline shaped behavior and how respect strengthened unity. Frank understood that service was not about seeking moments of importance. It was about being prepared when they appeared. That silent exchange earlier had become part of a larger lesson. It reminded Frank that respect did not fade with routine. Instead, it grew stronger through consistency. This understanding gave him confidence for the days ahead. As he moved forward in his journey, Frank knew that moments like these would continue to guide him. They would shape his choices and strengthen his character. Service was not a single event. It was a path built one steady step at a time. The night settled gently over the royal grounds, bringing with it a sense of calm completion. The day had been long, but it had passed smoothly, just as it should. Frank walked along the familiar path one last time before his duty officially ended. His steps were slower now, not from weakness, but from reflection. The quiet around him allowed his thoughts to move freely, and he welcomed that silence. As he reached the resting area, Frank removed his cap carefully and placed it beside him. He sat for a moment, allowing his body to relax while his mind remained clear. He did not replay the day in detail, but certain feelings stayed with him. The sense of purpose, the quiet pride, and the calm confidence were stronger than before. These were not emotions that came from praise or reward. They came from knowing he had lived up to his values. Frank thought about how far he had come. From a young man uncertain of his future to a soldier grounded in discipline, the journey had shaped him deeply. He remembered the struggles, the long days, and the moments when doubt tried to slow him down. Each challenge had taught him something important. Those lessons were now part of him, guiding his actions without effort. The moment of the salute returned briefly to his thoughts, not as a memory to admire, but as a reminder. It showed him that respect did not require attention. It existed naturally when people understood their roles and honored them sincerely. Frank felt grateful for that understanding. It strengthened his belief in service. Nearby, the King's Guard also reflected on the day as his duty concluded. He carefully secured his sword and allowed himself a moment of rest. Standing watch for long hours required patience and endurance, and he accepted that as part of his responsibility. He felt no frustration, only calm acceptance. The quiet exchange earlier had stayed with him too, reinforcing his sense of purpose. The guard understood that his role was often unseen and unspoken, yet it mattered deeply. He believed that protection was not about action alone, but about presence. Being there, standing firm, and remaining alert were powerful in their own way. That belief kept him steady through countless days and nights. As both men prepared to leave their posts, they did so with care. Frank checked his surroundings one final time, ensuring everything was in order. He believed that the end of duty deserved the same attention as the beginning. That habit reflected his respect for the role he carried. Walking away from the grounds, Frank felt tired but content. The kind of tiredness that comes from honest effort. He knew that tomorrow would bring similar routines and responsibilities, yet he did not feel bored by that thought. He understood that consistency was what made service meaningful. The path ahead was familiar, but Frank walked it with renewed clarity. He realized that true strength was quiet. It did not demand recognition. It showed itself through steady actions and reliable behavior. That realization gave him confidence, not arrogance. As the night grew deeper, the royal grounds rested peacefully. Guards continued their watch, lights remained steady, and order was maintained. The system worked because each person did their part. Frank felt proud to belong to that system. In his resting place, Frank allowed himself a moment of gratitude, not for comfort or ease, but for purpose. He believed that having a clear purpose gave meaning to effort. It turned routine into responsibility and duty into honor. He thought about the future, not with worry but with readiness. Whatever challenges awaited him, he felt prepared to face them with the same calm discipline. He knew that service would test him again and again, but he trusted the values that guided him. The king's guard, too, carried that trust with him as he stepped away from his post. He understood that tomorrow would bring another long watch, another silent duty. Yet he welcomed it. His role was not about change, but about consistency. Both men, though different in position, shared the same foundation. Respect, discipline, and responsibility connected them. That connection did not need words or gestures. It lived in their actions. As hours passed and the night continued, the importance of the day remained quietly present, not as an event to remember but as a lesson to carry forward. Frank understood that such lessons shaped character over time. When rest finally came, Frank slept with a clear mind. There was no restlessness or regret. He had done his duty honestly. That knowledge allowed him peace. Morning would come again, bringing new tasks and familiar routines. Frank would rise, prepare, and serve once more, not because he had to, but because he chose to. The story of that day was not one of dramatic events or loud actions. It was the story of quiet strength, of people who understood their roles and honored them without hesitation. Frank knew that many moments like this would pass unnoticed, and that was fine. He believed that the true value of service was not measured by attention, but by impact. As time moved forward, Frank continued his journey with steady steps. He remained the same in his behavior, guided by the same principles. That consistency defined him. The lesson stayed simple and clear. Respect builds unity. Discipline builds strength. Responsibility builds trust. These truths shaped Frank's path and gave meaning to his service. And so, without ceremony or celebration, the story reached its quiet end. Not an ending of completion, but of continuation. Because for Frank, service was not a chapter. It was a way of life.